Welcome to the Calm Analytics channel. I'm Boris Tizengauzen. Today is October 11th and this episode is going to be packed. In this episode, Trump thanks Putin. Is it trolling or a warming of relations? Meanwhile, Putin himself claims that Russia has developed a superweapon and that everyone should be afraid again. Meanwhile, additional air defense systems are being deployed to Moscow. What are they preparing for and what are they afraid of? And Melania Trump is bringing back Ukrainian children home. In Russia, people have been called upon to fight against Western toys, which are said to bring evil. Today, I'll show you what really brings evil. Also, how dictator Maduro tried to bribe the White House, and about a strike that hit deep inside Russia, 1,500 kilometers in, where it landed too. This episode will also have a lot of interesting things about North Korea and Kim Jong-un. So, if this is your first time on this channel, subscribe so you don't miss the next episodes. Donald Trump thanked Putin, reposted a video with him and wrote, "Thank you, President Putin." In this video, Putin is subtly supporting Donald Trump in his quest to receive the Nobel Peace Prize. And Putin says that the authority of the Nobel Committee has been lost, hinting that in general the wrong person received this prize. And here opinions are divided. Some people believe that Trump really did fall for such blatant flattery and reacted accordingly. He took the bait of such obvious flattery and responded in kind. But others think it was sarcasm. Like, thanks in quotation marks to Putin for the fact that this year the prize is passing me by. Well, I don't know. What do you think? Write in the comments. By the way, there's one very important technical detail. The deadline for submitting nominations for this prize ended on January 31st of this year. So Donald Trump, his inauguration was on January 20th. So at the time the application deadline ended, he had been president again for 11 days. Well, I guess they could have given it to him for his past achievements. Well, anyway, for now, and by the way, back then Trump promised to end the war between Russia and Ukraine in 24 hours. But you don't get a prize just for words. Although you know what annoys Donald Trump the most? That Barack Obama has this prize, the Nobel Peace Prize, and that he received it, let's put it mildly, as an advance. He also received it as an advance in the first months of his presidency. Well, whether he deserved it or not, I think you can decide for yourself now. Because, for example, I believe that the foundation of Putin's impunity was laid precisely during Barack Obama's time. By the way, the newly minted Nobel Prize laureate is Maria Machado. She acted very wisely and dedicated this prize not only to the people of Venezuela, but also to the President of the United States, Donald Trump. Now that's wise, that's the right thing to do. Well, you know, it's like a People's Choice Award. When children compete and one of them can't win anything, they give him at least something so he doesn't feel left out. A kind of People's Choice Award. And then there's Barack Obama and what he received in 2009, a Nobel Prize in advance. And the wording was for his extraordinary efforts to strengthen international diplomacy and cooperation between peoples. And there were three more points, one of which was attempts to reset relations with the Muslim world and with Russia. That's what he got it for too. So did they actually reset relations with the Muslim world and with Russia? Well then, what did all of this actually lead to? This attempt at a reset, which Barack Obama announced, was seen by the Kremlin as a sign of weakness, not as new opportunities. It's like, what kind of reset is that? I mean, what kind of reset can you have with thugs? And then there was the chemical attack in Syria in 2013. Assad, it was Assad's doing. And back then, Barack Obama said on the eve of this attack that the use of chemical weapons was a red line. The strike would be carried out against Assad's forces. Assad carried out the chemical attack, but Barack Obama never struck back in response. And then Russia took advantage of the pause and sent its troops into Syria. That was the moment. That's why US and Allied intelligence determined that it was indeed Assad who used chemical weapons. But the international community was waiting. Come on, Barack Obama, just give the order. I mean, how can this be allowed? Missile strikes were expected, even the American fleet was already prepared. That's it. At the last moment, Obama halts the strike, announces that he wants to get Congress's approval, and then agrees to the Russian proposal. That's it. So the proposal was as follows. Putin acted as a peacemaker. Assad was formally supposed to destroy his stockpiles of chemical weapons, but in practice, of course, he kept part of the arsenal. For the first time, Russia became a guarantor of peace in the Middle East. Or rather, it was made out to be one there. That's all. Let me remind you, this was 2013. It was the first time Putin emerged from a rather tough isolation after the invasion of Georgia in 2008. And Putin sees that Obama is not ready for a forceful response. That's it. Then just 6 months later, in 2014, Putin began to act aggressively both in Syria and in Ukraine, the annexation of Crimea and so on. By the way, Assad later used part of that arsenal he had hidden to carry out a chemical weapons attack in 2017. In general, for the Kremlin, this actually became something of a real triumph. After this episode, the Kremlin began to behave even more aggressively. There was an increase in intelligence activities in Europe, cyber attacks, and so on and so forth. That's all there is to it. In February, troops were sent into Crimea. Putin claimed, "It wasn't us, we're not there." The sanctions were completely toothless. A few weeks later, some targeted personal sanctions were introduced, and that was it. And at that time, Obama said, Ukraine is not NATO and the US will not get involved here. That was it. And for Putin, that became a signal. That's all. If a country is not in NATO, you can go to war with it and nothing will happen to you except toothless sanctions. So the foundation of Putin's confidence in impunity, and as a result, this war was laid precisely then, in 2013 to 2014. So, regarding whether it was deserved or not, in this case, I agree with Donald Trump because you shouldn't confuse a coward with a peacemaker. Pardon my French. And now some good news. Melania Trump wrote that they managed to bring 8 Ukrainian children back home. And let me tell you, this news is very important. It's extremely important because, first of all, every Ukrainian child abducted by Russia must return home without exception. Secondly, this is truly a very good deed, and thank you to the First Lady of the United States for taking care of it. But it's important to understand that if a maniac lets a few victims go, that doesn't stop him from being a maniac. There's no need to call him generous or kind or anything like that. Yes, we have to talk to him, we have to engage in diplomacy, but he remains a maniac. And the most crucial point of this news, first of all, I congratulate the families and loved ones of these children who will be reunited. And secondly, by returning 8 children, Russia is in fact confirming that it steals Ukrainian children. But they didn't just let their own go somewhere, did they? In fact, they admitted it. Yes, we stole them. We're returning 8 for now. 8. Let me remind you, the International Criminal Court's warrant was issued precisely for this, for Putin, for the fact that he illegally deported children from Ukraine, essentially stole them. Friends, let me remind you, we have an important fundraiser underway for the 101st Brigade for Ground Robotic Systems called Termit. These are unmanned evacuation vehicles that make it possible to save the lives of our defenders. Why is this important? Because when there is no unmanned evacuation vehicle, medics have to go out themselves, pick up the wounded, and can end up under fire. But with this, the evacuation vehicle takes them to a safe place, and the medics don't risk their lives and can save our defenders' lives in a safe location. That's why I ask you to join this fundraising effort. The donation details are in the description. There's Mono, there's Private, and there's PayPal for those who want to help from abroad. I am grateful to each of you, and our fighters are also very thankful to you.
Ми, бійці 101-ї бригади охорони, звертаємось до Бориса Тізенгаузена та його підписникам за допомогою. Ми дуже вдячні вам за раніше надані дрони. На сьогодні нам дуже потрібні 2 наземні роботизовані комплекси «Терміт» для швидкої і своєчасної евакуації поранених з поля бою, що у теперішній ситуації дозволить врятувати їх життя. Наші підрозділи воюють на Константинівському напрямку та Часовому Ярі. Продовжуємо нищити ворога і віримо в вашу допомогу. Слава Україні!
So in this case, your donation truly saves the lives of our heroes. If for some reason you don't see the payment details, here's a QR code. It also leads to the fundraiser. And Putin has announced that he has a new miracle weapon and also that the nuclear arms race has begun. I quote regarding the arms race, "I think that, in fact, a certain race is indeed underway somewhere," Putin said in Tajikistan. He also added that, against this backdrop, Moscow is working on developing new deterrent weapons. I think we will have the opportunity to announce new weapons that we once teased in the near future. They are emerging and undergoing tests here. The tests are going well, Putin stated. In other words, it just won't settle down, you see? Like a moth that just won't calm down until you squash it with a slipper. It'll keep trying to create some kind of super Wunderwaffe to threaten the whole world. The whole ensemble has already lost its mind, completely gone off the rails. Talking about super weapons, about how Russia will defeat everyone. That's Putin's favorite topic. But his most vivid story, as you surely remember, was when he showed those cartoons in 2018, addressing the Federal Assembly and saying, "We have such weapons. No one else has anything like this." Back then, he claimed that the Kinshal missiles couldn't be intercepted by any air defense system in the world. Well, in Ukraine, they are being shot down, and quite successfully. And he also said at the time, "We are not threatening anyone and we are not planning to attack anyone." And that Russia's growing military power is a guarantee of peace for everyone. We can see that, yes. Back then he was talking, I actually think he was referring to that super weapon of his, the one that's supposed to appear soon. At that time he was talking about the Burevestnik. This is a missile with a nuclear propulsion system which, judging by the footage Putin showed, those cartoons made by Soyuzmultfilm, this missile can fly endlessly around the Earth and basically go wherever you want. And no one will be able to catch this missile. Let me remind you about this Burevestnik missile. It's called the Flying Chernobyl. And according to American intelligence, it's been tested 13 times, this missile, and every single attempt ended in failure. So, according to Putin, it supposedly has unlimited range, but it has never flown more than 35 kilometers. So, basically, the Flying Chernobyl is going to crash down on Russians themselves. It's like... So the longest flight lasted only 2 minutes and 2 tests ended in tragedy. In 2019 in the Barents Sea, the Burevestnik crashed, and when they tried to recover it, the power unit exploded and 7 people, 7 scientists from the nuclear center in Sarov, ended up going to Kobzon's concert. So maybe that's what Putin was talking about, this super weapon. By the way, Kim Jong-un also regularly claims that he has some kind of super weapon, but he won't show it to anyone. And there was the parade for the 80th anniversary of the Korean Workers' Party, and Medvedev went there for it. He appeared on camera once, then was hiding somewhere, probably sneaking around in the corners with a little bottle. So Kim Jong-un said that he also has weapons, and he showed off the Hwasong-20 ballistic missile, an intercontinental one. So they seem to have some kind of plan, threaten 3 times a month, mention nuclear weapons 10 times. By the way, I still can't forget how Putin visited Kim Jong-un, and Kim Jong-un gave him a tombstone as a gift. Just look at the sting of this 1.5 meter tall dictator who doesn't seem to understand something. Somehow he hasn't ended up in hell yet, but he already has a tombstone. He already does. Well, that's just Kim Jong-un's interesting taste, I suppose. Are you as truly afraid of flamingos as they are in the Kremlin? So, the rockets disguised as flamingos have already caused a stir, and now the Russians are starting to deploy additional S-400 systems around Moscow. Or maybe it's not about flamingos at all, maybe it's because of the rumors that Tomahawks might be supplied to Ukraine. In any case, they're moving additional S-400 systems to Moscow, which previously were covering Grozny. They did the same thing before May 9th, when they needed to provide protection. They brought in air defense systems from Kazan and Grozny, but now the fact that they're pulling them in means they're preparing for something serious coming their way. I mean, the S-400s won't be shooting down drones, but they've also taken them away from Kadyrov, it turns out. By the way, Kadyrov had asked for additional air defense systems for himself. Well, it looks like those are the ones they've taken. Judging by his condition, he probably won't need them much longer anyway. By the way, friends, don't forget to subscribe to this channel. One boy didn't subscribe, and the next morning he started asking everyone, "Why did you bomb Donbass for 8 years?" So make sure to subscribe, friends. It helps spread the truth and fight against evil. They're tearing children away from love for their homeland. The State Duma is preparing a ban on foreign toys. Look at who they've decided to go after now. Foreign toys. In short, They've proposed to conduct an expert review, and if a toy doesn't conform to certain traditional values, that's it. Off to the trash, not allowed in, no hidden propaganda. What hidden propaganda? I quote, "Toys have become an instrument of hybrid warfare, through which alien values are imposed and children are torn away from love for their homeland," stated the head of the State Duma Committee on Civil Society Development. So, look, Enchantimals, those dolls, and Monster High, they supposedly promote destructive images associated with the cult of death. Well, I mean, obviously there are some little monsters there, and in Russia, they believe that these dolls cause children to develop fears and mental disorders. Seriously? By the way, I checked out those toys. They're like a monster school. Well, they're cute, and now I'll show you. I'll show you some real creepy stuff from my childhood. Who remembers this Kuklachev toy? Now, this is a toy from my childhood. This is where the real psychological trauma comes from. He looks right into your soul. Yeah, some kind of father of Chucky dolls. The Kuklachev doll is even creepier, and Kuklachev himself is just a creepy guy. He honestly looks like a maniac in clown makeup from some horror movie. I'm 100% sure that Kuklachev, the one who performed with cats, actually tortured them to make them do those tricks. Once, he was invited to some morning show. Just imagine, so many years have passed, and I still remember. They invited him to some morning program where they were performing different acts, and one cat, or maybe it was a female cat, refused to do the act. And he looked at her in such a way that I thought, that's it, he's just going to let her have it right there. That's why Kuklachev is creepy. Well, it's no wonder that now he's actively supporting Putin. All this otherworldly weirdness, this whole freak show, so to speak, they all support Putin. By the way, these representatives of the Russian State Duma have announced that we need to produce more domestic toys, more and more. Speaking of Russian toys, what are those, I wonder? Maybe Buratino? But that's a stolen image of Pinocchio. Everyone knows that. You know, the Iron Curtain in Soviet times was actually a big plus for the lazy. For Soviet authors and composers, I mean. They could steal, you could just take someone else's work and no one would ever catch you. Well, because no one would ever find out, that's all. The Iron Curtain, the Wizard of the Emerald City, Neznayka, Murzilka, Dr. Aibolit, who is really Dr. Dolittle. All of these are stolen characters. And here's an interesting piece of news I came across today. Venezuela offered Trump an oil and gold deposit in exchange for abandoning plans to overthrow Maduro. The New York Times reports that Venezuelan officials, seeking to put an end to the standoff with the U.S., offered the Trump administration a large share in the country's oil and other mineral deposits. According to reliable sources, the extensive negotiations lasted for many months, and this significant offer remained firmly on the table even when the Trump administration was publicly calling Maduro's government a dangerous cartel, actively sending powerful warships to the Caribbean Sea, and then began systematically destroying those numerous boats that were transporting illegal substances. According to these proposals, Maduro was indeed ready to open oil and gold mining projects to American companies, grant them priority contracts, redirect the flow of oil from China to the US, and also reconsider raw material agreements with China, Iran, and Russia. In fact, Maduro was offering to buy his way out, but apparently something went wrong, or maybe everything is going according to plan and someone is just raising the stakes. By the way, Donald Trump in his book The Art of the Deal talks about a life hack that he always uses. When your opponent is already ready to make a deal, already mentally counting the profit, you simply walk away from the deal at the very last moment, leaving him stunned, shocking him. The next time you come to him after some time, he'll already be willing to accept more modest terms. Maybe that's what's happening here too, I don't know. I'd like to believe that's not the case and that dictators won't be able to just buy their way out so easily. In reality, this news is alarming because the world has reached a point where a dictator and a terrorist can buy their way out with a good deal, for example, in resource extraction. Thank you. Rare earth elements or gold mines or oil. Then maybe even criminals could be released from prison for money. But what's the difference then? By the way, have you noticed that dictatorial and autocratic regimes are often found in countries rich in resources, like oil, for example? Yes, Iran, Russia, Venezuela. This is called the resource curse. When a country discovers oil, basically, the country starts living off selling it, off the money from selling that oil. In other words, the more natural resources a country has, the less incentive there is to develop democracy, industry, or institutions. You can just sell raw materials and that's it, like Russia does. A gas station country. Well, not quite just a gas station anymore. So instead of collecting taxes from citizens, which would require pleasing them in some way, the authorities live off this money. That's why the authorities aren't really dependent on taxpayers. Yes, they still collect taxes from them, but they're not heavily reliant. And that's it. And this creates an opportunity to form a certain elite that will concentrate all these riches in their own hands. And this elite won't want a change of power. Who would want to give up the feeding trough? That's how it is. This is the resource curse. But of course, it doesn't work that way for everyone, not for everyone.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
Some manage to follow a democratic path somehow. So, in places where everyone just sits tight and does nothing, that's where dictators come from. Now, a bit about traditional values, since we were talking about toys that supposedly scare away traditional values. The head of the Council of Judges of Russia, Viktor Momotov, ended up in the hospital after the confiscation of a network of brothels and 95 real estate properties. The head of the Council of Judges of Russia, he's involved. They opened a whole network of brothels there. He used his status and immunity to cover up this brothel network. Well, how did it come to this? And since we're on the topic of traditional values, let's keep going. Of course, I googled the latest news about the Russian Orthodox Church. Patriarch Kirill, who called Russia's war against Ukraine sacred, has made headlines again. I think his FSB rank must be at least lieutenant general. So, what did Kirill say? Russia should pray to God to protect the authorities from sins and mistakes. In other words, not all Russians, in his opinion, understand the importance of praying for those in power. Pray for the authorities so they don't make mistakes somewhere along the way. Well, like Momotov, right? He opened a chain of brothels. Someone must not have prayed hard enough for him, Russians. What on earth is going on? Basically, you need to pray, and pray again. So who is the main Tsar and God in Russia? Of course, it's Putin, so everyone absolutely has to pray for him. They're just out of their minds over there. I mean, now they even want to pray for Putin. By the way, attached to that news, there was another story about the Russian Orthodox Church that Archpriest Shvalagin of the ROC suggested that men commit crimes because of women. In other words, he called women the source of evil. So, what's his logic, this archpriest? They constantly come out with this kind of nonsense like women want too much, so men are forced to work a lot, and if he can't earn enough, then he has to get the money somewhere, which means he turns to crime. He came up with this statement based on his own thoughts, reasoning, and life experience. Basically, Russia isn't shy about using the church. I recently told you all about how priests in Moldova were actively used to promote pro-Russian forces on the territory of other sovereign states. Oh, well then. And of course, there are also those completely coincidental purchases by the Russian Orthodox Church of land plots near NATO military bases, near airfields. So one of the most effective tools of the FSB is the Russian Orthodox Church. And 2 days ago, I missed an important event. I should have told you about it 2 days ago. Why 2 days? Because exactly 2 days ago, it was the 4th day that the canisters were burning. That is, the oil terminal and the oil depot in Feodosia were on fire. They still haven't put it out. It's already the 6th day now. Yes, that's how it happens sometimes. The largest oil terminal was visited by drones. There you go. Deal with it. It's the hot tourist season in Crimea. Oil depots are burning, airfields are burning, radars are burning. Russians are panicking there, saying that some of the radars have been knocked out, which means there's some kind of corridor, which means missiles will fly. There will be a surprise as to what will fly. And the price of gasoline in Russia is breaking 14-year records. And as the cherry on top, I saved for last a new strike. By the Security Service of Ukraine, the Lord's Service, as we call it here. Now that's truly the Lord's Service, not the slimy Russian Orthodox Church. Drones struck the Bashneft oil refinery in Ufa. This morning, drones from the ASBU Special Operations Center flew over there, 1,400 kilometers from Ukraine. This is the 3rd visit to Bashkortostan in the past month. So there you have it, 1,400, and recently more than 2,000 kilometers. Bring it over they already have, and the Russians thought, well, why bother covering anything up anymore? Look at how far the drones are flying. Just haul everything to Moscow. We'll be protecting the bald replicants there. A note for Russians: when you were installing Pantsir systems on rooftops, no one told you that the booster stage would fly exactly in that direction. If it hits towards those residential areas, that's exactly where the booster stage will go. That's why the war is returning to where it started. I really hope that in the near future, many people in Russia will realize that this war should never have been started. And as for you, friends, take care of yourselves, take care of your loved ones, subscribe to this channel, and let's support our warriors from the 101st Brigade. Wishing us all a peaceful day, and glory to Ukraine.